Dr. Calvin Hargreeve, Chicago's celebrated heart surgeon, and Anika Varma, a young nurse from India, were colleagues in a bustling hospital, until a secret pregnancy turned admiration into obsession and trust into a deadly trap. Dr. Calvin Hargreeve was known across Chicago as a miracle worker in the operating room. His steady hands and sharp decisions had saved hundreds of lives, earning him awards, magazine features, and the deep trust of his patients. Inside the hospital, his name carried weight. Junior doctors lowered their voices around him, and administrators rarely questioned his requests. He enjoyed the authority and learned how easily it could bend rules without leaving visible marks. Outside the hospital, his life appeared equally perfect. He lived in a quiet neighborhood lined with trimmed lawns and parked cars. He was a married man, a father, and a regular presence at community events. Friends described him as calm and responsible. His wife believed she knew him completely, trusting his long hours and frequent emergencies without doubt. That trust became the shield behind which he hid everything else. What few people noticed was how carefully he separated his worlds. His hospital phone never rang at home, and his personal life never entered his office. He controlled information the same way he controlled surgeries, with precision and confidence. Over time, this control fed something darker. He began to believe that consequences were for others, not for someone as essential as him. The hospital rewarded results, not questions. When patients survived, no one cared how boundaries were crossed along the way. Dr. Hargreeve understood this system better than anyone. Each successful operation reinforced his belief that he was untouchable. The more praise he received, the more distant he became from ordinary rules. By the time cracks started forming beneath his calm image, Dr. Calvin Hargreeve had already built a life that depended on silence. To him, reputation mattered more than morality. And when faced with the possibility of exposure, he was prepared to do whatever it took to protect the life he had carefully. Anika Varma arrived in Chicago carrying 2 suitcases and years of quiet determination. She came from a small coastal town in Kerala, where nursing was not just a job, but a duty passed through generations. In India, she had been known for her patience and precision, traits that helped her secure a position in one of Chicago's busiest hospitals. To her, the hospital represented safety, structure, and opportunity in a foreign land. She worked mostly night shifts, moving through corridors when the noise faded and only machines spoke. Doctors trusted her efficiency, and patients remembered her calm presence more than her name. She avoided attention and rarely socialized beyond work. Her life followed a simple routine of long shifts, shared apartments, and video calls home. Every dollar she earned carried responsibility, sent back to support family dreams she was not part of anymore. Anika believed rules existed for a reason. She followed hospital protocols strictly, even when others cut corners. This made her reliable, but also invisible. Senior staff noticed her obedience more than her humanity. Over time, this obedience placed her closer to power than she understood. Certain schedules changed suddenly. Certain assignments came directly from above, bypassing supervisors. She sensed discomfort but dismissed it as adjustment stress. Speaking up felt risky in a system where visas, contracts, and recommendations controlled survival. As an immigrant nurse, she learned quickly that silence often meant security. She kept her head down, unaware that someone far more influential had begun tracking her movements, her shifts, and her vulnerabilities. Anika did not arrive in Chicago seeking trouble or shortcuts. She came to heal others and build a stable future. She trusted the hospital to protect those who serve it faithfully. That trust would later become the very thing used against her, turning her workplace into a place she could no longer escape. The change began subtly, almost quietly, as Anika's body started sending signals she could no longer ignore. Fatigue clung to her even after rest, and her hands trembled during routine tasks. At first, she blamed night shifts and stress, but a private medical check confirmed something far more serious. She was pregnant. The news froze her in place, not because of fear of motherhood, but because of what the pregnancy represented in her life. The child connected her to a reality she had tried to compartmentalize and control. The father was a man whose name carried authority, whose life was already sealed behind marriage, status, and protection. Anika understood immediately that this was not a situation where honesty would be rewarded. She weighed every possible outcome carefully, knowing that as an immigrant nurse, she stood on fragile ground. Despite the pressure building around her, Anika made a firm decision. She would not terminate the pregnancy. Her beliefs, shaped by family values and personal conviction, left no room for compromise. She viewed the child as her responsibility alone, something she would protect quietly without demanding acknowledgement or support. What she did not anticipate was how quickly her decision would be detected. Medical systems recorded changes, appointments, and test results. Nothing stayed invisible for long inside a hospital run on data. Almost immediately, her work environment began to feel different. Supervisors avoided eye contact. Shift notices arrived without explanation. Her name appeared on schedules that made no sense. Anika sensed a growing tension, as if unseen walls were closing in. The pregnancy was no longer just a personal matter. It had become a threat to someone else's carefully constructed life. Still, she held onto the belief that refusal did not equal danger. She believed the hospital's rules, ethics, and systems would protect her. That belief gave her strength, but it also made her underestimate the desperation. The pressure did not arrive loudly. It seeped into Anika's routine in ways that were difficult to challenge. Her shift rotations changed without warning, pushing her into understaffed wings and late hours that left her isolated. Requests for clarification went unanswered, and official emails were replaced by informal instructions that left no paper trail. Everything appeared normal on the surface, yet nothing felt right. Her access permissions began fluctuating. Some days, she was locked out of patient systems she had used for months. Other days, she was assigned tasks outside her usual responsibilities, often in restricted areas where supervision was minimal. These changes were subtle enough to avoid suspicion, but frequent enough to create constant unease. Anika felt watched, measured, and quietly tested. Hospital records later showed that many of these adjustments originated from high-level overrides. Policies were bent using administrative authority, masked as efficiency decisions. No one questioned them. In a place where hierarchy ruled, orders from above were accepted without curiosity. Anika became a variable in someone else's problem, repositioned like equipment rather than treated like a person. The emotional pressure grew heavier. Performance evaluations became unusually detailed, highlighting minor delays and insignificant errors. Praise disappeared. The atmosphere around her hardened, as if patience had expired. She sensed an expectation forming, an unspoken demand for compliance that had nothing to do with patient care. Still, Anika remained composed. She documented her work carefully and followed every protocol, believing accuracy would shield her. She avoided confrontation and trusted that professionalism would restore balance. What she could not see was how isolation was being engineered deliberately. Behind closed administrative systems and altered schedules, the hospital was slowly being turned against her. The walls she once trusted were closing. The breaking point arrived disguised as routine paperwork. Anika was notified of a medical appointment listed under her employee file, scheduled during a workday without her request. The entry was vague, marked as a corrective procedure rather than a consultation. She immediately recognized what it implied. Someone had initiated a process meant to end her pregnancy quietly, using hospital systems to make it appear voluntary and medically justified. She did not attend the appointment. Instead, she formally declined it through internal channels, documenting her refusal with clear timestamps. That single act disrupted weeks of silent planning. Systems built to move smoothly suddenly stalled. Notifications were triggered, records flagged, and the refusal could not be erased without leaving evidence. What had been a controlled situation turned unstable. After that day, the atmosphere shifted sharply. Anika's name appeared less often on team boards and more often on isolated assignments. She was excluded from routine briefings and removed from collaborative units. The hospital, once busy and familiar, began to feel hollow. Long corridors replaced crowded stations. Silence followed her movements. Internal audits later revealed that emergency privileges were temporarily assigned to her profile, then removed. These changes served no clinical purpose. They existed only to place her in vulnerable positions without witnesses. Anika sensed danger, but struggled to define it. Nothing overt had happened. No rule had been broken in a way she could report. Her refusal had not ended the pressure. It had intensified it. What she believed was a protected decision was instead treated as defiance. Somewhere above her, a calculation was being rewritten. Compliance was no longer the goal. Control was. Anika continued working, believing that persistence would wear down hostility. She underestimated how far someone with power would go when reputation, family, and status felt threatened. The night everything collapsed began like any other late shift, quiet and stretched thin by understaffing. Construction work had been ongoing for weeks, and temporary barriers redirected foot traffic through unfamiliar corridors. That evening, a storm moved over the city, heavy rain pounding against windows and interfering with external power lines. Inside the hospital, emergency systems activated automatically, but not every section was fully illuminated. Anika was assigned to the recovery wing that had recently been cleared for renovation. Only a few storage rooms and monitoring units remained active there. The assignment made little sense given patient volume, but she followed the schedule as instructed. Camera coverage in that area had been partially disabled due to wiring upgrades, a fact buried deep in maintenance reports no one reviewed. As the night progressed, badge access logs recorded limited movement in the wing. Anika's ID showed normal activity until just after midnight. Then it stopped. No exits wipe, no break record. Her phone last connected to the hospital network near a sterilization unit several corridors away, an area she had no clinical reason to enter. By early morning, coworkers noticed she had not checked out. Supervisors assumed a documentation error. It was not until the next shift arrived that concerns surfaced. A search was initiated quietly, without alarms or lockdowns. Administrators were careful to avoid panic. Her phone was discovered first, placed neatly on a metal counter, wiped clean of fingerprints. The battery had been removed. Nearby equipment showed signs of recent use, but logs were missing. The recovery wing was sealed temporarily, labeled as a safety precaution due to the storm. By sunrise, Anika Varma was officially listed as missing. The hospital continued operating as usual. Patients were treated, surgeries proceeded, and somewhere within the building, a truth far darker than a power outage waited to be discovered. Hi. Anika's body was found 2 days later inside a temperature-controlled medical storage unit located beneath the recovery wing. The discovery came during a routine inventory check, not an emergency search. The door had been sealed correctly, with no visible damage or forced entry. To an untrained eye, it appeared as a tragic case of human error, someone trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hospital leadership moved quickly. An internal report classified the death as an accidental malfunction involving automated locking systems. The explanation was technical, complex, and difficult to question without specialized knowledge. Most staff accepted it without protest. The idea that such a modern facility could fail in this way felt disturbing, yet believable enough to close the conversation. The official medical report omitted critical details. Signs of struggle were explained away as post-mortem muscle reactions. Time of death was estimated broadly, avoiding precision. Most notably, Anika's pregnancy was absent from the final documentation, despite earlier medical confirmations in the system. Those records were later found to have been edited, then archived. Dr. Calvin Hargreave's involvement appeared minimal on paper. He was listed as a senior reviewer who approved the conclusions, a routine responsibility for someone in his position. His signature gave the report credibility and finality. With that approval, The hospital declared the incident resolved. Anika's family in India received formal condolences and a carefully worded explanation. Distance, legal complexity, and trust in American institutions prevented immediate challenges. The hospital offered compensation and closed communication channels swiftly. Within a week, the storage unit was cleared, sanitized, and returned to service. Maintenance logs were updated. Câmara repairs resumed. The recovery wing reopened quietly. Anika's name disappeared from schedules, then from internal systems entirely. The silence surrounding the case might have lasted forever if not for a routine system upgrade months later. During the migration of hospital data to a new security server, fragments of deleted information resurfaced temporarily. Most of it was meaningless system noise, but one junior IT analyst noticed repeated access conflicts tied to the recovery wing on the night Anika disappeared. The timestamps did not align with the official report. Further review revealed badge access logs that had been manually altered, not erased. Someone had changed entries to appear automated, but the pattern showed human intervention. One ID appeared more than once in restricted zones during the power outage window, then vanished from the final version of the logs. The name attached to that ID belonged to Dr. Calvin Hargreeve. The analyst flagged the anomaly quietly, unsure of its importance. Internal compliance officers attempted to resolve it internally, labeling it a system glitch. But the data did not behave like an error. Backup servers told a different story. Camera feeds marked as unavailable showed signs of deliberate shutdown rather than technical failure. Maintenance requests had been filed after the incident, not before. As more inconsistencies surfaced, pressure mounted behind closed doors. Emails were exchanged, then deleted. Meetings were held without minutes. The hospital's legal team became involved, signaling that the issue was no longer technical. What had once been sealed as an accident began to look like orchestration. An anonymous report was finally sent to federal authorities, containing fragments of restored logs and metadata. Investigators recognized patterns consistent with evidence manipulation. The hospital could no longer control the narrative. When news reached Anika's family that the case was being reviewed, questions they had buried resurfaced with force. What was once dismissed as fate began to resemble intent. The system that had erased Anika, so EFF. Federal investigators moved methodically, reconstructing the night piece by piece. What the hospital had dismissed as technical irregularities now formed a clear pattern of intent. Financial analysts traced a series of discrete payments routed through consulting firms and third-party vendors, all connected indirectly to Dr. Calvin Hargreeve. These payments coincided with system maintenance requests, legal consultations, and off-the-record settlements made immediately after Anika's death. Medical examiners reanalyzed preserved samples using updated reports. The revised findings contradicted the original conclusion. Anika's time of death was far narrower than previously stated, aligning precisely with the period when Dr. Hargreave's access card appeared in restricted zones. The storage unit's locking mechanism showed signs of manual override, not malfunction. What had been presented as an accident could no longer withstand scrutiny. Investigators also uncovered altered personnel files. Notes regarding Anika's pregnancy had been deliberately misclassified and hidden under unrelated medical codes. Audit trail showed that only one individual had the authority to make such changes without secondary approval. That authority traced back to the surgeon's administrative privileges. As pressure mounted, colleagues began distancing themselves. Former allies provided documentation to protect their own positions. The hospital issued public statements emphasizing cooperation, while privately preparing for legal fallout. Dr. Hargreeve was placed on administrative leave, his image removed from promotional materials almost overnight. The final breakthrough came when deleted internal messages were recovered from an external backup vendor. These messages outlined contingency plans, reputational risks, and the urgent need to resolve a personal liability before it escalated. The language was cold, calculated, and unmistakably intentional. By the time an arrest warrant was issued, the courtroom was filled with a tense hush as the trial began. Evidence, meticulously gathered over months, laid bare the orchestration behind Anika Varma's death. Every altered log, every deleted record, and every financial transaction pointed to one person, Dr. Calvin Hargreeve. Prosecutors painted a portrait of a man who had carefully manipulated systems meant to protect patients and staff, transforming them into instruments of control and concealment. Testimonies from IT analysts, medical examiners, and former colleagues revealed a chilling level of planning. Each witness described how small decisions, shift changes, isolated assignments, equipment overrides, had built a trap that left Anika with no escape. What had been reported as an accident was now exposed as premeditated, carried out under the cover of authority. The court saw how unchecked power, when combined with fear and secrecy, could turn a respected surgeon into a predator. As the verdict was read, Dr. Hargreeve showed no emotion. His medical license was revoked permanently, and he received the maximum sentence for murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of power. Outside the courtroom, Anika's story sparked nationwide attention. Hospitals began reviewing their internal systems, emphasizing whistleblower protections, independent audits, and accountability measures. Her name, once nearly erased from records, became a symbol of resilience and justice. Though her life was taken, Anika's courage and refusal to surrender her autonomy ensured that the truth prevailed. Policies changed, oversight strengthened, and her story became a cautionary tale for medical institutions across the country. The system that had tried to erase her could not erase her impact. In the end, justice was served, not just through punishment, but through awareness, reform, and the enduring memory of a nurse who stood firm against manipulation, even when facing the most powerful force in her life.